On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks offseason might be over. How did Nico Harrison do? Pretty good. What's our confidence level in him and the Mavs winning a title? We'll answer that on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks podcast.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
You are Locked On Mavs.
Great, Rusty.
Your daily Dallas Mavericks podcast.
Almost done.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Amazing.
Your team every day.
Still can't eat milk.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen today. With the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day on any podcast platform. Leave us a 5-star review. Take us with you wherever you go. Listen every day on the podcast platform. Like the video on YouTube. Comment anything below. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sport stops sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a daily boost or bonus. Daily, that's right. Something for everybody, every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And joining me from 105.3 The Fan, the consummate professional. What you got for me, Reggie Adetula?
I think that I might have officially hit the threshold of like old. And I say that because I think
Someone
that
call you an old head?
No, not necessarily. I've been called Unc relatively recently.
Oh,
But I think I've taken a nap 5 out of the last 6 days. And I'm wondering if this will ever stop again. And so that's,
did you start hosting the morning shows?
No, that's not.
doing
Yeah, I don't know exactly what's happening. I think it's just like my body's like, you get the nighttime sleep, and then you got to get a daytime sleep in.
Today, we'll talk about how washed Reggie is. We'll also talk about how Nico Harrison has completely changed this Mavs roster and this depth chart. We'll talk about that and talk about the confidence, some of the changes that he made. We'll talk about the confidence Nico Harrison has gained over this offseason. But let's start here. We're going off of, or we're asking some of the questions around Tim Cato's Mavs fan survey. It's great stuff. I retweeted it at Nick Van Exit, or you can just go to Tim Cato's profile, answer the questions, because we will talk about it. I will talk about the results on this show. We'll talk about the questions on this show. Some great stuff there from our friend of the show, Tim Cato. But let's start with one of the first questions. How successful has the Mavericks 2024 offseason been? To me, you have to look at it in a hole. You have to look at it in the hole, around the hole, where it is. Look at it as a whole, right? There's the college in Oklahoma, Oral Roberts. They have a whole person scholarship that they give to somebody where they think that this person embodies what a whole person should be. So physical, educational, mental, emotional, all that kind of stuff. The whole person. We have to look at the whole offseason. Look at what the Mavericks did. They got Clay Thompson, Naji Marshall, Quentin Grimes, and Spencer Dinwiddie. You look at what they lost, Derek Jones Jr. You look at Josh Green. You look at, maybe Markieff Morris. And then you look at what they could have done or what they were capable of doing. And if you take all that, to be honest, he's now become Frank. People forget about Tim Hardaway Jr. And you look at what they could have done, like what was capable, what was possible for them. And to me, I think it's an A offseason for what they were given. For what they were given and what they ended up doing. I think Nico Harrison should get an A for it. And overall, it's been a very successful offseason because you lost some of the things that you struggle with. You know, Tim Hardaway Jr. couldn't figure out ways to get him in the lineup. You struggled with shooting. You struggled with some extra ball handling. You got that. And Clay and Spencer Dinwiddie, you replaced what you lost in Derek Jones Jr. with Naji Marshall and Quentin Grimes. And I think if you can do all those things within the parameters that you could, while also staying under the first apron, which is one of the tax thresholds that limits you in so many different ways, I think this was a very successful offseason for the Mavericks.
Yeah, absolutely an A. I don't even know what I almost wonder, should I give him an A+? Because I don't know what more you could do, because you mentioned it, right? Like the limitations that were here, we're talking about not a very, very, very limited draft capital. You just did not have a lot of opportunities. Contracts that weren't like the most appealing necessarily all the way around. And I think ultimately you come out of it with more of what you desperately needed in the playoffs, which was shooting. And one of the things about it is you moved off some players, but I think you got really optional. There's a lot of optionality with this roster now. And I think that when you look at Jason Kidd and the ways that he's handled this, like I think you've probably raised the ceiling on this, the potential ceiling on this, and you've given him a lot of optionality so that when he gets into those times where it really matters in the postseason, there are various options that you can maybe turn to find answers. And when you looked at this postseason, there were times where you could not find answers when you were looking for them. Now you have more rocks to turn over to maybe find the answers that you need at times. So I think that is, with the framework of what you came into it, I think that's absolutely a success for Nico Harrison and this Mavs front office.
You can go bigger lineups: Dinwiddie, Luka, Naji Marshall, PJ Washington, Lively. You can go some smaller lineups and go maybe PJ at the 5 or Maxey at the 5 with PJ, Naji. Quentin Grimes could be in that. Luka. You can go shooting heavy with Luka, Kyrie, Clay. Add maybe Naji Marshall's shot continues over. Quentin Grimes' shot maybe is back to where it was in New York, and that's great for you too. You can throw Hardy in there. Luka, Kyrie, Clay. Hardy is not good defensively, but you're not super small at that point, and you can shoot a ton. Maybe Derek Lively adds his shot this season, and then that all of a sudden becomes something. We did see him hit a 3 in the NBA Finals, which is still like one of the most insane things that happened last year. The Mavs made the finals, and still one of the most insane things that happened was their rookie made his first 3 of his career in the NBA Finals. Just insane. But they're optional, like you said. You can do a bunch of different things. You can do a super heavy defensive lineup to lock down. Throw in, you got Grimes, you got Naji Marshall, PJ Washington, Derek Lively, and then as your guard defender, throw in Dante Exum. Throw in, whoever else you want to throw in. Like all of a sudden, you're like, okay, that is a lineup that can shut down some teams. And you can do 3 attackers: Dinwiddie, Kyrie, and Luka. Like you've got a bunch of different options there, like you said, which that's what makes them successful because they ran out of looks against the Celtics.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be fair, the Celtics asked the level of questions that I don't know how many NBA teams are capable of asking of a team at any given time. But that Celtics team doesn't look like it's changing. In fact, they've re-upped on so many players. Like that remains a stumbling block or an obstacle, I imagine, if you want to be an NBA champion in the 24-25 season. And so, yeah, you have to give yourself options to maybe answer those questions. And they absolutely did in this offseason, particularly with not very much to work with. This is how many different junctures where you get to for Nico Harrison, whether it's a trade deadline or an offseason, where I'm like, how is he going to make it out of this box and he Houdini's his way into a better situation for this roster? Absolutely an A in my book.
It is. It's to get those 4 guys. And now I think one of the things that I've been talking about with this roster is that Jason Kidd has a task in front of him to manage all these personalities. Being optional, having options, and having a bunch of dudes is nice. And it's always good to see the full depth chart. Like you look at this full depth chart and you go, man, it's nice to see competent guys in the second unit: Dinwiddie, Grimes, Marshall, Maxi Kleber, Daniel Gafford. And then third string, you got some interesting dudes too. Dwight Powell can be a capable guy that comes in. Dante Exum has played some really great basketball last year at times. Jaden Hardy could take a step forward. We've seen Omax Prosper and AJ Lawson can step in at times. They were part of that 30-0 run that the Mavs went on against the Thunder that one game. Like we've just seen things from all these guys, but you also have all these guys, and now all of a sudden, will Kidd have a 10-man rotation, 11-man rotation to fit all these guys? And that's sort of now the big question. But as far as the Mavs offseason in general, the only teams that I think made better moves overall had more options in front of them. You look at the Sixers getting Paul George, or the Thunder getting Hartenstein and Alex Caruso. The Mavs didn't start with a ton of cap space. The Thunder had over $30 million in cap space. The Sixers had $50 million in cap space. Insane amounts. The Mavs didn't have that. They had their mid-level exception. They had no picks. They had the 58th pick in the draft that they turned into Melvin Aginsa, who we haven't even mentioned because he's going to be a draft and stash guy. And so we'll see next year possibly what he can turn into. But you look at everything the Mavs were given, and now what they've turned it into. And if you're grading it on that, it's an A. If you're grading it on what talent they added and how much better they got, then maybe it's a B, right? Then maybe you go that, because they didn't take a huge step forward getting a Paul George or a Hartenstein Caruso, or they didn't get 2 definite starters necessarily, but they could. Grimes, Marshall, and Clay could turn into starters at some points during the season, and Clay will be one.
Yeah, and that's another thing, is that there's definitely a little bit, pardon me, of upside that's also available in some of these moves. So there's that. And if you allow me to go to a philosophical level, right? Like if you want to look at it this way, the offseason has been incredible when you look at the status or the prestige of the Dallas Mavericks, right? This is an organization that had, I mean, I don't know about you, but I think there had been a lot of people that looked at it and been like, why don't nobody want us, right? Shout out to the Fresh Prince, right? You look up and now there are teams, there are players of certain consequence choosing you and making it evident that this is a place to be, right? The status, in addition to like making the finals, which obviously raises your status, but the status of this place as a destination has changed in this offseason. I think this offseason definitely put a stamp on it at the very least. And I think that matters as well when you talk about the ability to build a team and continue to progress going forward.
The reason this is all turned into this is that Nico Harrison has been given the reins and he's taken them in a completely successful direction. Why did that happen? And how has your confidence changed, Nico Harrison? We'll talk about that coming up.
You don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel.com. Go check out, see everything they have available. They just dropped the regular season win totals. I'll definitely do episodes on that coming up probably next week. And so the Mavs, 50.5 wins. You think the Mavs will get more than 50 wins when they have their full complement of players? They have this depth chart that we just talked about that we're very excited about and all that. 50.5 kind of seems low for the Dallas Mavericks. So maybe they're betting on some health issues and things like that. But go and check that out. Go take the Mavs over if you want that. Go take the Mavs under. It's the same odds for either one, but that's the over-under set right now. They have all kinds of other things, too. They've got Olympics. They've got all kinds of Olympic things. Yes, Robin Hood is an English story. I do need to clarify that for everybody from Monday's show or Tuesday's show, so I appreciate each and every one of you. But they have all kinds of other stuff, too. Not just archery. They have all kinds of stuff for the Olympics. FanDuel.com. Go check it out. See what's available for you. Again, FanDuel.com.
Shut it down! Let's go home!
Thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of the show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. If you want to support the show, text me, get alerts from me on Mavs rumors and more. Support the show. Subscribe to the Insiders program. You get text straight to your phone. The Mavs, Locked On Mavs Insiders, 214-643-8637. Text the number in the description or click the link as well. I'll be doing more of that when I get back from vacation next week and all that kind of stuff. So I'm excited about launching that again for next season. That will be absolutely incredible. There's a ton of you that are on there right now. I really appreciate each and every one of you. So subscribe to the Mavs Insider program. Locked On Mavs Insiders. Text the number. Don't call it because I don't know what happens if you call it. I actually have never tried. You can try it. You can try and see what happens.
And let people know what it sounds. Oh, never mind.
Robot voice. All right, Reggie, we're talking about the Mavs front office. The Mavs offseason was a successful one. We both gave it an A, considering what they had available for them and what they ended up getting. But now, one of the other questions in the fan survey that Tim Cato of The Athletic put out, how confident are you in Nico Harrison and the Mavs front office? It was a scale of 1 to 5. And let's just say 1 is least confident, no confidence at all. I submit a bill of no confidence for Chancellor Valorum's leadership, or a 5 where you are the most confident and you're like, I'm ride or dying with this guy right now. What's your confidence level if you are a Mavs fan or where you are now?
5 of them things. Like I don't see. Am I bugging? Do you see a reason to like have skepticism? Right. The one thing that I've had coming into this, right, and maybe this is this particular offseason or maybe just in the last year or so, is I've been like, he's been good. However, you've looked at maybe he's worked with, and this is a credit to him as well, being smart and working with the places where you can get over. One of the things I always talk about, or at least I think about a lot, is, hey man, there are some general managers or executives that drive a hard bargain. Yes, I'm looking at you, Danny Ainge, right? Like there's some people that it's hard to make deals with. And then you look at some people in the league and you go, that's a Mark over there, right? I could take him for his stuff. And it felt like Nico Harrison, for the most part, had kind of stuck to some of the rivers and the lakes that he was used to when it comes to folks that are, I can get over on. And maybe that's not quite the right language, but, folks that that you can maybe more easily get a deal with and that are not going to drive as hard of a bargain. But after enough time, like I got to give him credit for the whole thing, right? He has managed to make deals in all of these spaces and continually, time over time. And we mentioned this earlier in this podcast already, like with not a lot available to him, going to the Bank of Presti, being creative to make the team better year over year, month over month. And you got to salute that. Like the idea that I am not going to be backed into a box and backed into a corner at any point and have an opportunity of making this team better and have guys that are more than willing to jump in on this and come in and contribute and identify great talent. right? PJ Washington was one where around the league, there were voices that were like, I don't know, right? He does his job there,
right,
but I'm not certain. He's come in. He's been incredible. He wasn't a great three-point shooter. And yes, he had obviously a little bit of a, I guess, regression to the mean in the playoffs in some time. But he also gave you a lot of really great shooting, identifying that and pulling that as that is a talent that we know that we can make better. We're going to go and get this guy for maybe a little bit less than what other people are valuing him. And boom, now he comes in and adds something, being able to pivot. We saw that with the Matisse Thybulle thing. And then we absolutely saw this with the Derrick Jones Jr. this offseason. Like, I don't even know how many more things I can point to that Nico Harrison has gone above and beyond, making this a better place and above what I think what you expect from a general manager and what you've had for a general manager for a while in this place. That's a 5 in my book.
You think about where he started. So he starts in summer of 2021. They sign Tim Hardaway Jr. to that long-term deal where the Pelicans apparently offered him more than he took less to come back to Mavericks. And we were like, okay, it's not a great deal, but it's a good deal. It's descending and all that. And hopefully it'll look better later. Ends up being not that great of a deal for the Dallas Mavericks overall. Not necessarily. Then you go through and he gets Jaden Hardy in the draft. His first huge move that he actually did to change the team was February of 2022. He trades Porzingis, takes the risk. Porzingis for Davis Bertans and Spencer Dinwiddie. And talent-wise, you definitely take a downgrade. But fit-wise, it ended up being really great. The Mavs make the Western Conference Finals, which was great. And the Mavs move on there. You do that. Vibes were definitely immaculate there. But then you have that problem with Jalen Brunson leaves, and you lose Jalen Brunson for nothing, and that was a huge thing. And so you talk about some of the mistakes that he made early on. I wouldn't call the Porzingis trade a mistake necessarily, but some could look at it that way. Then you have the trade for Christian Wood, took another risk. That one didn't work out that well for him. You sign JaVale McGee and talk highly about JaVale McGee and say that he could be a starter and all that. You go through, and that season was, the start of that season was a disaster. That last season was a disaster. Then he takes the risk again, trading for Kyrie Irving, and that one didn't work out that well in that season. But then the season after that works incredibly well. Does the Grant Williams trade, and that one doesn't really work out that well. And then he adjusts, signs Dante Exum to a deal, signs Derrick Jones Jr. to a deal, does the trade for PJ Washington, Daniel Gafford, and now all of a sudden they're hitting the ground running and they make the NBA Finals. They lose there, but now you make all the moves you do in this summer, and you start to look at in the entirety of what Nico Harrison has done now with the Mavericks. Takes a lot. He's willing to take risks, which you wouldn't think that. The shoe salesman, quote unquote, coming in and doing this job for the first time and never having worked in a front office, not a lot of experience. Yeah. You wouldn't think that he would be the guy to take a bunch of risks like that. He does. Porzingis trade, Kyrie trade, doing all that. And now he's learned from his mistakes, I think. He's made this Mavs team more talented. You look at the talent level, just go from that 2022 training camp roster to now the 2024, 25 one. It is insane the level of talent between there. There's besides Luka, not any of those players would start on playoff teams. Maybe Dorian still at this point, but none of those players would start or maybe even play big minutes on a playoff team. And now you look at what the Mavs have now, and much different story. Plus, they're younger. They've got more talent. They're younger. They fit together better. The chemistry is better. It's like, how much more could he have improved this team overall? And it's hard for me to look and think, all right, what if the Clay thing turns out in a similar way that the JaVale thing did, where it just doesn't work out? All right, well, what's the chances that Clay, Spencer, Dinwiddie, Naji Marshall, and Quentin Grimes don't work out? What's the chances that all four of them don't work out? And if that's the case, then maybe we look back and go, all right, well, he screwed that all up. But I don't think so. I think at least two or three of them are going to work. And if that's the case, then boom, you add to a team that made the finals last year.
Yeah, and you bring up some great points to the ways in which there were swings and misses, like the Christian Wood. There was a lot of people around the league that were like, yo, not really going to work the way that you won. They were like, look, we just got to take a risk. And I appreciate the risk, but that's there. Grant Williams, I don't know how I blocked that out, but hey, there you go. I think it's probably fair. Maybe I'm a little bit too high on or drinking the Kool-Aid or whatever. Maybe a 4 is more reasonable, but you've seen the ways that you're right. He has gotten better at this. And maybe I'm also placing blame in other places and trying to take that away from Nico Harrison, which maybe isn't fair, right? If you're the guy, you have to take all of it.
The Brunson one, you could say, is not necessarily his fault. He came into a situation where Brunson was not signed to the correct deal when he was a second-round pick, and so then he wasn't a restricted free agent. So then he was stuck with an impossible situation where a team tampered to get a player, signed him to a deal that nobody else was going to sign him to. The Knicks took the correct risk. Even us at the time on this show said that they should have just signed him to the max and given him whatever. But even then, we don't know because he just took a ton less money to stay with the Knicks. So we don't even know if you gave him the max if he was going to go with the Mavs. Like, we even have more proof of that now. But yeah, like that one you could say is maybe not his fault. The Porzingis one, he was also strapped to the move that the Mavs were kind of holding on to that wasn't working because of injury and all that. But he's learned from his mistakes. And to me, I think that is the thing about Nico Harrison that has really impressed me, and that he looks and identifies things that the Mavs need. He's like, all right, we need shooting. Okay, he goes and gets Clay Thompson, one of them, like the best shooter that changed teams this past year. He brings back Spencer Dinwiddie, who has been a good shooter for the Mavericks. Grimes has been a good shooter. Naji Marshall was a good shooter last season. And you're like, all right, well, they just improved shooting with the 4 guys they brought in. They need point of attack defense. He brings in 2 guys that can do that. I mean, they needed veterans. He brought in Clay Thompson. All that. They've just taken a step forward. And so to me, it's a 5 too. I'm confident in him going forward. And he's going to have some misses too. I mean, who knows what all 4 of these guys, if they all work out, but as long as a couple of them do, then the Mavs are set up really well for now and for the future.
Agreed.
Coming up, let's talk about this Mavs depth chart. Let's talk about how they fit together now. Let's talk about how the moves that Nico Harrison did will actually work for the Mavericks. We'll talk about all that and more coming up.
You don't believe you shouldn't be here.
Today's episode of Locked On Mavericks is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use that code LOCKEDONNBA to get $20 off your first purchase. Right now, I'm recording this on Wednesday night. I'm going to bring Reggie back in for this. I'm recording this on Wednesday. White Sox Rangers, Thursday night. What do you think the cheapest ticket on Game Time is for a White Sox Rangers game?
Well, it's a day game, in fact. So I imagine it's going to be decently cheap to be able to get in the door.
$7.
Oh, I was thinking 15. Okay, wow.
$7 to get in on Game Time. You can go check out the view from your seat. You can do the all-in pricing too, which it might not be $7 all-in pricing, but you can go check that too. They have all kinds of other stuff. Janet Jackson is coming to Dickies Arena, so you can go check out that if you want. All kinds of other things. A bunch of artists I don't recognize, but I do recognize Usher is coming to the American Airlines Center in October. Get tickets for that. That is awesome. So go check out that Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account. Use that code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply at Game Time.
It's great. It's great, dude. Dude, it's great. It's great. It's great, broski. Bro, name it. It's great. It's great. It's great, bro. It's great. It's great. It's great. This life's great, bro. I have no complaints. I don't.
All right, Reggie. That's the first time I've used that, and it's not been ironic or sarcastic, right? So the first time I've used that Kyrie, it's great drop. That one keeps giving, man. That is a great drop. I will hold on to that one for a long time. We're talking about the Mavs front office, the moves they have made in this offseason, and how the confidence level in them has jumped over the last couple of years. It's been awesome to see what they've done and what Nico Harrison and his crew have been capable of. So now let's look at what they have. Let's look at what they have done. This depth chart, you start with Luka, Kyrie, Clay Thompson, PJ Washington, Derek Lively. The second, I think, will step into that starting spot. Reggie, you agree with that starting lineup, or would you make any changes to it?
No, I imagine that's the starting lineup, at least when you to get things going. And I guess sorry, I don't know what happened there. Maybe not even starting, but like closing, I think also matters more than anything. And like this is what you went and got Clay Thompson for, is the opportunity to like knock down big shots in big moments. And obviously space, have your best players on the floor. Yeah, exactly.
You said your catchphrase. Your catchphrase is, this is why you sign. This is why you
That's right. That's right. And you get a big player like that, not to not play them in the big moments. Yeah, absolutely. So that feels like absolutely what you're working with. I mean, Derek Lively continuing to grow at center. This absolutely feels like having your best 5 on the floor for any given big moment. So starting and more importantly, closing, that definitely feels like the 5.
Yeah, the Lively Gafford thing is interesting. I'm curious at what Jason Kidd ends up doing with that. But I think if Lively takes a step forward, then there's just no, and from what we saw in the regular in the playoffs and in the finals, like there's just no way you can look at that and be like, you know what? Let's not start Lively. Let's not put our best foot forward, like you said. But
and I mean, again, optionality. You have the versatility of if a matchup favors Gafford, he has that opportunity, and he's still going to be very valuable as like probably the best 1-2 tandem when it comes to centers in the league. He's still going to matter in the rotation, particularly in the 82 of this all. And I mean, also probably still in the postseason when you need that depth, depending on what's happening.
And one of the things about these guys in Lively and Gafford is that you don't want to play them more than like 25 minutes really, because then you lose some of that explosiveness, the athleticism. And so Gafford will get his time because you can't play Lively 35 minutes. I mean, maybe
not yet. Right?
Maybe he grows into it and all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, play this guy as much as we want.
Right. Development isn't linear, but the way that he's moved in his rookie year, only God knows where he goes in year 2.
What are some of the best centers last year? We'll go like Sabonis 35 minutes, Anthony Davis 35 minutes, Jokic about just under 35 minutes, Gobert 34 minutes, Bam Adebayo 34 minutes. Those are like some of the best ones. We'll see if he ever ends up getting to that level. But then you look at like the depth chart behind him, and that second unit, it just the most complete unit we've seen from the Mavericks. Dinwiddie, Grimes, Naji Marshall, Maxi Kleber, Daniel Gafford. That seems like a functional lineup that could go out there and do some stuff. Our friend Jimmy of All Things Mavs put out a tweet that was like, how good would this team be in the East? And just listed all the guys that aren't starters. Dinwiddie, Grimes, Naji Marshall, Maxi, Daniel Gafford, then Exum, Hardy, AJ Lawson, Omax, and Dwight. And to me, I know they don't have a Mikal Bridges, but that's the 2023-24 Brooklyn Nets. Basically that team. They won 32 games last year in the East.
Yeah, and I think the most important part is that how often are you going to see your bench, your second lineup straight out there like that? Like you're probably going to get some mixing in of one of your, 3 in the front, I guess, backcourt there, whether it's Luka, Kyrie, or Clay involved there. But what is nice is with the addition of Spencer Dinwiddie, this is one of the benefits of him as the 15th man on the roster is that you can have instances where possibly Luka and Kyrie get a seat and a breather at the same time. The staggering is probably still going to happen, but you can be a little bit more, you can have a little bit more leeway with that to get them some rest as you move that around, where maybe it's those two and Clay is still playing on the floor. So you still have that threat in the backcourt, but you have an opportunity to get those guys more rest. So the optionality again shows up there. And it's what we talked about a lot, a third dude who you can trust to run the offense and get dudes involved and create plays. Spencer Dinwiddie hopefully can fully exemplify that here.
And they just have so many, like the options, like you mentioned, they have so many different guys. They have three definite attackers, Luka, Kyrie, Dinwiddie. Maybe Clay can do a little bit of that. Shooters in Clay, Luka, Kyrie. PJ will be that a little bit more this year. Quentin Grimes has been a great shooter in his spot. Dinwiddie has been a great shooter with the Mavericks. You can go big with, you can go Lively or Gafford with Maxi as well and go a little bit bigger. Maybe throw PJ at the 3, and that can be your bigger lineup with Luka. And then all of a sudden you have a 6'8" point guard with 6'8", 6'10", 7 foot. I mean, you can just go in so many different directions. I think you could play even Naji at the 2, have him at the point of attack. Defender at times. Like if you play that huge lineup, Lively, Maxi, PJ, Naji, Luka. That's a huge lineup, and all of a sudden you're big at every position. And so when you talk about options at the beginning of the show, that's what I start going through in my mind is like, oh, you can do things like that, and all of a sudden, like, good luck scoring on this team, how big they are.
I guess you could do that. I don't know how much I like that in theory, but hey, maybe they roll it out there twice, and it looks interesting. I don't know.
It's not we're running this out for 10 minutes in a game.
Right.
It's let's throw. All of a sudden they're getting into the paint too much. We need to throw some guys out there that stop that, and we just need some size out there to thwart that.
Yeah, here is a curveball. It is not your fastball. You're not throwing it a whole bunch of, but as an off speed is a change of pace. I see what you're going for there. Yeah.
Speaking of curveball, I still want to see PJ at the 5. That's what I still want to see. We barely saw it last year. It didn't really work in this.
That's the problem. It's like you threw it in there a little bit, and you were like, "Here, let's test it," and it never really felt like it worked very well. And I don't know, like it feels like it's a little bit playing him at the 5 is a little too far away from the job that you ask him to do on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And when you have 2 dudes, maybe 3 dudes that you feel capable of doing that before him, when you talk about Lively, Gafford, and then also Maxi Kleber, I don't know that it's necessarily the best thing to keep throwing him into that position.
So that would be the Mavs version of like the death lineup. Do you know someone who played in a death lineup that could maybe make that more tenable this year?
All right, I know that you're going for the Clay Thompson thing. I know that you're doing, but you know what made the death lineup work? I mean, look, Clay Thompson obviously factored in. Steph Curry, clearly, Draymond's versatility and his capable of doing those things, right? Like
Clay being an all defense guy.
Right. What makes those things work are the dudes that are playing out of position, being able to do that at a high level. And this is no shade to PJ, because what he's able to do at the 4 and at the 3 is incredible. Let him be a wing and let him be a wing to the best of his ability, just because you got that spot covered.
How dare you? Look at his face. Look at PJ's face right there. Tell him he can't do that. Tell him.
I'm not going to tell him that he can't. I know that
he's stand on business right in front of you.
That's right.
Look at his face.
Whether he's in an elementary school meeting with the kids or on a basketball court in the NBA finals, he's going to stand on business. I believe that. I trust that. However, we talk about let's put him in the best position to succeed. And again, how beautiful is it that I'm out here trying to knock down the idea of him playing small ball 5? Because, hey, man, we got plenty of those at home. We got a whole bunch of
have them. You have the options. It's not a necessity.
Right. Like we don't have to do this. And you've got 5s that are variable, right? You've got 5s that are big guys that you ostensibly can stretch. And you've got guys that have some range and some motion, right? You've got guys that can imagine you can run the gamut of what you ask from a center. So like having this as a breaking case of emergency of him at 5, cool. I don't know how much you need to push that. But again, it speaks to the optionality of these things. The one thing that the one question that I have, and it was the question I had when the deal was made for Clay Thompson, or at least the news came, and I think I'm not going to feel comfortable with it until I see it on the court, is when you get to very particular point of attack matchups, do you have the right answer for that? Because I think that is the place where there's the most pressure on this lineup is, are you having Quentin Grimes have to step up and be like, hey, answer this big time question? Or is it Clay Thompson? Does he still have that in his bag in enough of a way? Those are the two things that I look at and I go, maybe. But if that's the only thing I'm worried about, I think that you're in a really, really good place to go and contend this year.
Those are the questions that need to be answered. We'll continue to answer them all summer. So stick back with us on Locked On Mavs. We'll be back. I'll be talking more about this survey, the Tim Cato survey from The Athletic. So go check out the episodes next week. Continue to take the show on the road with you on the podcast. Continue to subscribe to the podcast. We appreciate each and every one of you that are listening on there. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom!